Hello everybody and welcome to Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. I'm Jack and today we're going to be looking at an early build of Rapid Strike Urshifu. This is one of my favourite archetypes going forward. Obviously Rapid Strike has been good for the past few months anyway, but I think it gains a lot more than it loses, given that Mew rotates, and that was one big thing holding it back in certain matchups. That's basically the whole reason why Rapid Strike seems so good. There's no bench protection right now, and that kind of leaves Urshifu free reign over the bench with VMAX Rapid Flow, which is a very scary concept, to be quite honest with you. Just before we jump into the video, make sure you check out the Potown store for PTCGO codes, including the Evolving Skies set very soon. Make sure you keep checking back because they will have Evolving Skies codes from day one, and you can use that code Omnipoke for an extra 5% off your order when you go to the checkout. So yeah, make sure you check them out. It helps us out, it helps them out, and obviously you can get your codes nice and early, which is great. So the basic concept of Rapid Strike, it seems a lot better when as Mew rotates. We have no bench protection, as I mentioned earlier on. It means that basically there's no way to protect the various 1 prizes, 2 prizes, even the VMAXs from getting sniped on the bench. It looks to be a format that heavily revolves around boss. Sniping is just as good as boss, and when you're able to do so much damage manipulation with things like Passimian, Telescopic Sight, Inteleon, all of that good stuff, it turns out you can do just as much damage as if you were hitting in the active anyway across 2 targets, which is really strong. The new Medicham also gives like another level of comeback mechanic to the deck. Obviously, we've mentioned in a lot of our videos so far that there's not really much comeback potential into the game right now. Medicham letting you take an extra turn, though, can be exactly that. It lets you draw extra cards, it lets you find another boss or another supporter to be able to find boss or anything like that. You know, there's a lot of different things you can do with Medicham, and I think it is a very, very good card. There'll be certain situations where you just can't use it, and there'll be certain situations where it's just a highlight reel kind of card, but I do legitimately think it is a very solid include in the deck, and I think it's worth considering for sure, just because taking an extra turn is huge in this game, especially when right now games only last 3 or 4 turns. Taking an extra turn is like 1/3 of a game, getting a free 1/3 of the game to yourself. So that's crazy. So yeah, onto the list. We'll start off with the Pokemon, and we have a 4-3 Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX line. Obviously, as I mentioned, the VMAX has 2 really efficient attacks. Gale Thrust for 1 does 150 if you move from the bench to the active, which is great. We have lots of ways to switch and move around with the deck, so that's really efficient damage in the early turns for setting up numbers ready for VMAX Rapid Flow, which for 3 energy makes you discard all energy and puts 120 damage on 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. So yeah, we can basically manipulate that damage with things like the quick shooting Inteleon and the throwing coach Passimian to be able to do the right amount of damage to either take prizes or set up that yoga loop from the Medicham, which we'll go over momentarily. Unfortunately, we haven't found space for a 4th VMAX, and I think 4th VMAX is probably one of the first cards you want to add. Post-rotation, we have no com, which means finding VMAXs is a little bit harder. I think you can make this kind of cut in an Inteleon engine because Shady Dealings can search for things like Evo Incense anyway. Plus, this deck can play auxiliary lines, which I'll get to when we get to the tech options, which can also search out the VMAX. So I think this is one of the only decks you really can thin down to a 3 VMAX line, but I think it is fine. And then obviously we've got the set version of Rapid Strike, just because Strafe is really good, as well as 100 Furious Blows actually being relevant in a fair few matchups now with the release of things like Glaceon. It's important to have some sort of inbuilt out, which is cool. We've got one of the new Medicham V. As I mentioned, that Yoga Loop attack for 2 energy puts 2 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon, and if the Pokemon is knocked out, you get to take another turn. You can't use Yoga Loop on subsequent turns, but just being able to take an extra turn is really big. Putting 2 damage counters is a bit limiting. Obviously, you have to really manipulate that damage properly, but with things like Inteleon, we can bump our numbers up to the right amount of damage, as well as things like Throwing Coach to bump up the damage as well, and then make sure we have enough counters so that Yoga Loop is taking a KO. Between Gale Thrust and a VMAX Rapid Flow, that's 270. With a Throwing Coach, that's 300. And that means any 320 HP VMAX Yoga Loop already knocks out. And then if they have more than 320 HP, we can do 1 quick shooting to get them into range anyway. So you can see there's a lot of damage manipulation, a lot of numbers we can play around with here, which is really good. And then one Passimian as well, Throwing Coach, as I mentioned, dealing an extra 30 damage to your opponent's Pokemon V on the bench. Again, just being able to buff up that damage is very nice to be able to really find those exact numbers you need for Yoga Loop, or even just take KOs on things like Crobats, Cricketunes, Eldergosses, all of that good stuff. We've then got a 4-4-2-1 line of the Inteleon. Keep Calling is still very good. We have all of our basics are Rapid Strikers, so Keep Calling is basically just search for 3 basics and pop them onto your bench. Turns out these Call for Family attacks are still really good, and I think it's actually a really nice selling point of the deck, to be honest, being able to keep calling for your attacker as well. There's not many decks that can do that play Inteleon engines. Things like Ice Rider can't really do that because they don't play Rapid Strikes, so yeah, being able to find your attacker as well is pretty cool. Drizzile obviously has the Shady Dealings ability, which is the dex consistently. It helps you smooth out getting exactly what you need. Similarly with the one Inteleon, letting you search for trainers. The Shady Dealings Inteleon letting you search for trainers as well. And then we have 2 Quick Shooting Inteleon. Again, as I mentioned, being able to adapt the damage on your opponent's side of the board to be able to get into either Yoga Loops or just taking KOs is really important. Also, worth noting that Inteleon isn't out to things like Decidueye, Glaceon, and Zamazenta as well. A lot of them have better answers, but Inteleon is actually our only answer against Desi, so it is worth noting that as well. Onto the trainers, we've got 4 Quick Ball, 4 Level Balls, 3 Evo Incense. Again, we've tried to bump these as high as possible. Obviously, 4th Evo Incense could be added in pretty easily. It's going to help you find things like Drizzile and Inteleon as well as the VMAXs, so can't really argue with it. But I think 3 is fine, especially when we have 4 Level Ball as well to be able to search Drizziles for the combo pieces we need, or the draw cards we need, the consistency, the supporters, all that good stuff. So yeah, trainer or other items, we have a couple of air balloons and a couple of switch and a couple of Tower of Waters, so all of these different ways of retreating, moving around. You can kind of play any number of these in any kind of order you want, depending on how big the stadium war is or how much tool denial we see, stuff like that. It's all kind of mix and match with these 6 slots, but I think 6 is the sweet spot to be able to keep doing Gale Thrusts in the early game and setting up numbers. And then finally we have 1 Telescopic Sight as well, just because, again, being able to manipulate numbers is very important, as well as Telescopic Sight plus Passimian letting you do 180 to 2 bench Pokemon. So again, like I mentioned, Crobats, Cricketunes, Eldergosses all get KO'd with a Sight plus Passimian, which means you can just win this game, or win games via the prize race way rather than the sort of the combo Yoga Loop way, which is important to know as well. Supporter-wise, we've actually gone a really far and wide with the supporters. I actually really like this approach when playing Inteleon engines. You'll see in another of our Inteleon lists that we're playing an approach similar to this. But I like having a fairly high amount of supporters. We still have 8 draw supporters, which is the same as sort of any standard deck playing for Research for Marnie. But because we have things like Drizzile and Inteleon to search out specific cards, we can find the supporter that is best used, has the best use case in the scenario we're in. So that's why we've gone for 2 of each: Research, Marnie, Birdkeeper, and Zinnia, because all of them are very good in certain situations. I found playing this deck and playing pre-rotation Rapid Strike that Research turn 1 and 2 is pretty good, but after that you really want to start building your hand up, digging towards combos, digging towards Rapid Strike energies turn after turn, stuff like that. So you don't necessarily want to be dump and drawing everything every turn, which is why Zinnia's, I think, is a very good addition. I was already playing Erica's pre-rotation, and I think Zinnia's is actually better than Erica's marginally, so that's good. Birdkeeper, again, letting you move around as well as drawing some cards, building your hand is good. And Marnie, obviously, having some quote-unquote disruption as well as shuffle is important. 2 boss, again, we like to snipe a lot, but being able to boss up important targets is very useful, as well as being able to just stall for a little bit, especially if we are looking to pass or try and gain an extra turn to be able to then push into a Yoga Loop to gain a free turn. Being able to stall with bosses is obviously still great. So I still wouldn't drop below 2, even though we have basically nothing to stop us sniping anymore. And then finally 1 Raihan. I think this card is very strong in the deck, to be honest. I've really, really enjoyed playing with Raihan so far. This is very similar to Rosa, when one of your Pokemon, you can only use this after one of your Pokemon was knocked out. Choose a basic energy from your discard pile and attach it to one of your Pokemon, and then search for any one card and put it into your hand. So essentially, pre-rotation, we have things like Karate Belt to be able to do back-to-back rapid flows. Now we have Raihan. Obviously, this is only a 1 count, so it's a little bit less reliable because things like Karate Belt could just be attached and were ready when they were ready. Raihan you actually have to find and use on a specific turn, but I think that's okay because of the Drizzile engine that we're playing. And yeah, being able to sort of go for that G-Max Rapid Flow, especially with a weakened Urshifu, knowing that if they knock it out, you're going to be able to get another G-Max Rapid Flow out of nowhere, and if they don't knock it out, if they decide to attack for something else, you can attach to... You get an extra attachment, basically. You don't lose an attachment, because if you get knocked out, you still have the extra attachment as if you'd attached the turn before. So yeah, it basically gives you 1 extra attachment or buys you 1 extra turn, which is kind of 1 extra attachment either way. So yeah, really, really strong card. Letting you go for multiple G-Max Rapid Flows is very strong. Finally, onto the energy, we have 4 Rapid Strikes, of course. 4 captures. I think capture is really solid post-rotation. It's basically 4 extra quick balls, and when you can capture attach to a Sobble, when you can attach a capture to a Sobble and then use Keep Calling, you can pretty much fill your bench on turn 1, which is crazy good because it means that you're pretty much set up turn 2 to be able to just pop off with Drizziles and stuff like that and get going. And then we are running the 3 basic fighting energy as well. There's been lists here and there playing higher counts, playing lower counts. I think 3 is fine. Initially, like pre-rotation, it was 2, but with the inclusion of Raihan, I think you do have to play a 3rd just to make sure you have one in the bin at some point. So here is the full list. Feel free to pause while we're here if you want to just briefly look over the full 60. And we do have some tech options. I mentioned earlier on, Octillery with the Rapid Strike Search is a potential option for the deck. In a lot of lists, it was played as a 1-1 pre-rotation, and I don't hate it post-rotation. I actually think it's fairly solid, but I think you have to make a couple of weird cuts, maybe like a Capture Energy, and maybe the Telescopic Sight probably has to go as well, thinking about it, to be able to accommodate for a 1-1. I think Karina's Focus is potentially a nice call for one of the supporters, maybe a Zinnia or a Birdkeeper, if you do include the Octillery as well, just to have a draw supporter out to Rapid Strike Search. That's one thing I really missed pre-rotation that I wish I'd put into my Rapid Strike decks when they were playing Octillery, just one Karina's Focus. So yeah, definitely recommend that one. On the flip side, we have the Galarian Moltres V and the Energy Switch. Obviously, there has been a lot of talk about Rapid Strike with Galarian Moltres V. Obviously, Rapid Strike's big weakness is its Psychic matchups, especially Calyrex. And Galarian Moltres has proved to be one of the best counters to Calyrex. So yeah, there's been a lot of talk about pairing these two just to kind of counteract each other's weaknesses, which is interesting. Over here at Omnipoke, we feel Galarian Moltres is a bit weaker post-rotation. It's a lot slower. But because you have a Drizzile engine, there have been lists where they've tried to jam it all in, and if you're playing it with the Drizzile engine, you can find things like E-Switch and even E-Search. You probably have to play in that list and stuff like that as well. So it's a little bit clunkier. I don't think it's as good as people think it's going to be. I think unless unless Calyrex is like 20% of the meta, it's still probably not going to be worth it, because I think teching for Mirror, i.e. playing a more consistent list, should win you more games, because I think I expect to see more Rapid Strikes than Calyrex is. But should Calyrex ever get hugely popular, I think the Moltres build is still perfectly fine. A couple of more individual techs. Fan of Waves looks to be more and more promising card post-rotation, particularly for things like Mirror, Rapid Strike, just not being able to basically net the free Rapid Strike energy is going to be really good, being able to push them back a turn, as well as getting rid of so many captures that are going to be out there. Like I say, I think Capture is a very solid card post-rotation. So being able to push your opponent back an attachment is very important. We've seen that so far from our testing. Basically, whoever goes first and attaches first wins. This way you can kind of get back into the game, because you can Fan of Waves their attachment behind to make sure they're an attachment behind, and if they have no acceleration, then you can kind of go ahead that way. And then finally, Scoop Up Net. Scoop Up Net is kind of, I think, again, as a one-of, really fine in a Drizzile engine, because you can find it when you need it. It's really good for reusing or making space once you've used these Shady Dealings Inteleon. Typically you want to use that in kind of a panic situation where you need to draw out of it. But then you want to scoop up, net it back, and be able to either use it again or probably more likely use a quick shooting Inteleon on it instead. So yeah, being able to pick that up is very nice. We couldn't really find the space for it, but I think instead of one of the switching outs, you could probably pop one in. Matchups wise, I actually think the matchups are fairly good for you. There's a couple of crosses here, and that's a couple more than, or at least one more than some of the decks we've reviewed so far. Obviously, Shadow Rider seems pretty dodgy because you can't play things like Jirachi anymore, as well as the old Hooper that they used to play as a tech. So yeah, you can't play that anymore, which means that Shadow Rider is pretty dodgy. Like I say, if you're really worried, you can look more towards the Moltres build, which I'm sure we'll be profiling at some point in the near future. As well as Glaceon being, I think, slightly unfavored unless you tech for it. One thing that I didn't mention on the text page is something like a Phoebe as well as an Eldegoss or a Palpad. Again, Palpad works really nicely in the Drizzile engine, and Phoebe plus Eldegoss really complement each other with this wide variety of supporters, because it means that you have more outs to your specific supporter on the turn you need it. So they definitely are worthy inclusions if you're worried about Glaceon. Obviously with Phoebe, you're also going to be getting through things like Decidueye and Zamazenta as well. Though, for what it's worth, I don't think one Phoebe would get through Zamazenta. I think Zamazenta would probably beat you out. I think one Phoebe could potentially get you through, well, one Phoebe plus one Eldegoss could potentially get you through Glaceon, providing they bench enough other Pokemon like Inteleons and Suicunes and stuff. And similarly, I think between Inteleons and a Phoebe plus Eldegoss, you can probably break through Decidueye as well. So that definitely could be worth it depending on the state of the walls decks in the meta. Other than that, I think most of the other top tier matchups seem pretty favourable for you. I think Ray is a very strong matchup, similarly with Eternatus. And I think you can really pressure down things like Ice Rider and Victini very, very well, which is good. I think it's important to be able to have a chance against some of these top tier decks, obviously. So yeah, I think most of the matchups on the screen are pretty okay for you, and at least one of them is techable for maybe you have to kind of rehash the deck entirely to be able to beat Shadow Rider, but it turns out that could be the way to do it. So yeah. Finally, some closing thoughts. It really does look to be a front runner of the new format. I think a lot of people are convinced it's going to be very, very top tier, and it looks to be very impressive. Obviously, there's still consistency issues here and there, but I think there is a lot to like about the Inteleon engine. There's a lot to like about no Mew for the deck anymore. I'm not 100% sold on Medicham, but I'm like 95% sold that it's a really worthy inclusion. But it may turn out that it's just not quite worth it. But so far in testing, it's been very impressive just being able to just take that extra turn to be able to sort of find a combo piece or play another supporter, stuff like that, and really pressure down the opponent. Even an extra few Inteleon pings here and there is very good. So yeah, it feels like you can adapt to pretty much anything your opponent is playing, provided they don't have weakness on you. And with Medicham, Inteleon, and Passimian, as well as the Telescopic Sight, you can really adapt your damage based on what you're dealing with, what you're going to be up against. So yeah, it looks very, very impressive. And I'm really excited to play around with Rapid Strike post-rotation. But yeah, let me know what you think down below. Obviously, there's probably a million and one ways we can play Rapid Strike post-rotation, because it's kind of able to let its hair down and go free with no Mew about. So let me know what your favourite Rapid Strike build is for post-rotation. And other than that, make sure you stay tuned for the channel for various other post-rotation Evolving Skies deck lists. I have been Jack from Omnipoke, and I look forward to seeing you guys in another video. Cheers, everyone.